If you work with designers or are a designer yourself, you need to design for accessibility. Hi everyone, welcome back to DD Academy. My name is Sam Lee, and in this video, we're going to go over some basic tips to help ensure that your designs bring a better experience to everyone. Okay, so what is digital accessibility? Digital accessibility refers to building digital content that can be used by a wide range of people, including those who have visual, auditory, motor, or cognitive disabilities. I also want to note that while this is a topic about disabilities, it's actually something that benefits everyone, not just people with disabilities. At first, designing for accessibility might seem a little bit complicated. There's a common misconception that there's just not enough time or money to worry about these things, when in reality, if it's just a part of your process or workflow, there's not really much of an additional cost or effort. In fact, it's really quite easy and ultimately makes your product way better. Oftentimes, making your product more accessible will bring better search results, performance, and of course, usability. We all have the power and responsibility to make sure that everyone has equal access to information, no matter what their capabilities are. So with that being said, let's jump into the 5 basic tips to help follow the AA level requirements of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG for short. By the way, WCAG is an international set of guidelines for creating accessible content, and AA is just a standard level that most organizations strive to meet. The first tip is to add enough color contrast. You want to make sure there's enough contrast between your text and background colors. This one is really easy to overlook, and yet one of the most critical things designers can check in order to make sure that people with visual impairments and color blindness can easily consume information on the page. According to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, the contrast ratio level between text and its background should be 4.5 to 1. Do keep in mind that as the text size becomes larger and heavier, the ratio requirement becomes more lenient. I highly recommend taking a look at the Web AIM Color Contrast Tracker tool to make sure that your contrast ratios are high enough and to read more about the requirements. I'll leave a link for that below. Tip number 2, don't use color alone to communicate information. People with low visibility or color blindness can have a hard time understanding your content if you only use color as indicators or visual cues. You can switch it up a little bit and try using patterns or labels in your designs. Here's a great example from Trello's colorblind friendly mode. When turned on, the labels become more accessible by adding texture. Another good trick here is to view your designs in black and white and see if you can still understand and differentiate the information. Tip number 3 is to design usable focus states. Focus states are indicators to show selected items and are usually used on links, form fields, widgets, buttons, and menu items. For users that are blind and use screen readers, or for people who primarily use the keyboard to navigate the web, it is important for these focus states to stand out and be highly visible so that they can understand where they are on the page. You can also design focus states to fit your style within the CSS so that it doesn't have to be obnoxious or distracting from your brand. Tip number 4, use labels or instructions with form fields. There's a huge trend going around where placeholders are used instead of labels for form fields. Let's face it, there's a lot of reasons why this can be appealing, especially when it makes the design look more simple and modern. However, it's important to remember that placeholders are not labels, and people who use screen readers depend on these label tags to know how to navigate the form. Otherwise, the screen reader will just skip over the placeholder text, and the user would have no idea what to put in the form field. So even though it's tempting to overlook this, we should make use of labels so that we don't sacrifice usability just for the sake of simplicity. The last tip I have is to write useful alt text for non-text content like images. People who use screen readers are only able to hear the web, so if you don't write any alt text, they're missing out on a lot of context on the page. In fact, if you don't write any alt text, the screen reader will just read the file name to the user, and that's pretty much the worst experience for anyone. Remember, context is everything to the user, so try your best to describe what's happening in the picture as best as possible. For example, if there's a picture of a cow, don't just write cow in the alt text. Describe what it's doing. Maybe it's grazing on some grass or walking across the field. You get the idea. And that's it. 5 really simple tips to get you and your designs closer to being accessible and meeting the WCAG requirements. I hope that this video has helped you see that designing for accessibility can be really easy and inspires you to include our tips in your process. Thanks for watching, and make sure you like and subscribe for more useful content like this in the future.